Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for making AP Human Geography a part of your day. People are not distributed randomly, right? One thing we will say in here: birds of a feather flock together. And social and economic characteristics can dictate where people live. There are always exceptions to the rule, but we have to speak generally here. All three of these models that we're going to look at were based on the city of Chicago and based on the city of Chicago at different times. More on that to come. The nice thing about Chicago is it has a CBD. Remember that? Downtown, the central business district, the centrally located place where a lot of transportation and communication converges. We learned about that last time. So the first one is called the concentric zone model. This is also called the Burgess model. Here is E.W. Burgess. Goodness gracious, what a handsome fellow there. All right. Almost, I mean, that comb over is legit. They don't give you that at the Great Clips. All right. So this starts in 1923. Put yourself in the time period, okay? I mean, we're living in that 21st century, doing something mean to it. I mean, this is like 95 years ago. My man is putting this together. World War I goes 1914 to 1918. So this is just 5 years after World War I. And he's observing Chicago when he says, hey, man, this is how I see it. I'm starting to observe some of the characteristics when I'm looking at the CBD and I'm looking at the areas moving out away from it. So again, the very first ring is the central business district. The innermost ring, non-residential activities are mostly concentrated, right? You got some services there at that time. Well, let's just move on. Number two, you get your zone in transition. Right? This contains manufacturing. This contains lower quality housing, right? Typically, immigrants to the city are the first to live in that zone of transition because it offers small homes, right? And then they can subdivide it. What they did is they created apartments by subdividing some of those larger houses. So also single individuals were commonly living there. He saw that. The third zone moving out again is the zone of working class homes, right? Modest older homes occupied by stable working class families. Move out even further, that's what he called the zone of better residences, right? Newer, more spacious, middle and upper class. And then beyond that, you have your commuter zone. So some people who work in the central business district don't want to live in the central business district, right? You know, you call it the commuter zone. I would liken it to the friend zone. When people talk about the friend zone, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but the basic idea, I believe, is you want the friendship, but you really don't want to go beyond the friendship. And that's totally fine. Friendship's awesome. I love friendships. I even have a friendship bracelet. Okay. But what I'll tell you is this: when the commuter zone, like you like the city, you want to work in the city, but you're not committed enough to the city to live in the city. You want to be on that outside where you can get in close proximity to all the things the city offers without committing to the city and living there. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I actually think it's a pretty awesome example. You see what's going on here. We got our central business district, if you can follow the cursor. Moving out away from that, we have our zone in transition, right? You see smaller homes occupied by individuals with less economic buying power. You move out a little bit further. Now we're getting a little bit more space in between the dwellings, right? That third zone, again, we call that zone of working class homes. Move out even further. Yeah. Okay, this is our zone of better residences. You chop a tree down and there's rings around a tree, right? When you look at those rings on the tree, which rings are the newest? It's the rings on the outside, right? Think about that when you're thinking about the concentric zone model. The newest homes are the ones on the outside. The oldest ones are the ones on the inside. I took some real census data from Indianapolis, and I pretty much saw this exact thing working. Right, I started to look at income less than 35,000, 35,000 to 45,000, 45,000 to 55,000, 55 to 75. Essentially, the darker the shade, the more income. The lighter the shade, the less. And what happens when you move away from the city? You start getting more income, more income, more income. That's just moving out to the east side. Now let's do it for the south side. Oh, yeah. More, more, more. Yes. Do it to the west side, same principle. Do it to the north side. Now notice the north side is just like a big block of wealth, right? Oh, by the way, yeah, we call him the Lord of the Rings, E.W. Burgess. Homer Hoyt in 1939, first year of World War II, by the way. World War II goes 1939 to 1945. He's looking at this and he's like, okay, I see what you did there, Burgess, and I like it, but let me add some stuff to that, right? Let me go ahead and make it a little bit better. He says there's like sectors or wedges, right? Where there's either wealth or like lack of wealth, essentially. He's looking at the development of the city as not just moving away from the CBD, increasing wealth, but there are like sectors of greater wealth, right? So he adds the sector part, but he keeps the basic idea of economic development being higher the further away you get from the CBD, right? So things like housing, things like manufacturing, things like services, they all develop in sectors, and they're typically developed along transportation lines. He has what you call a filtering down process. He adds that to it. As the older areas are abandoned by higher income people, lower income people come to occupy those once inhabited by higher income individuals. This is what it would really look like, right? You would have like this spine or wedge here, which is the transportation and industry, like your manufacturing, right? Then you would have something like your low class residential. Again, the further away you move away, right, the bigger the houses are, but it's still what will be, you know, when I say low class, I'm not putting that on an individual. I'm just talking strictly upon economics. He had this middle class residential here and here. There's three of them, and then there's like your high class residential. This would be what we saw in Indianapolis as we moved up north all the way to like Carmel. You have definitely this wedge of wealth, right? That'd be a good metal band name, Wedge of Wealth. Last one we're going to look at is the multiple nuclei model. Multiple nodes, man. And C.D. Harris and E.L. Ullman, and these are dudes that are going to make another, what we'll call the Latin American city model. We'll look at that next time. These dudes say, listen, all right, y'all are, Burgess and Hoyt tried to simplify it, but it's more complex than just like circles, and it's more complex than just like wedges. The city's a complex thing, and you have multiple nodes. Like, say, for example, you might have a port. You might have an airport. You might have a university. You might have a park, right? And then other services are going to be attracted to those nodes. Let me give you an example. When we're talking about universities, you go to, let's just take the city of Indianapolis. We have IUPUI, right? Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. And in IUPUI, there are certain economic activities that are attracted to IUPUI. For example, restaurants, bookstores. What about like airports? Well, where's the airport at? The west side, Decatur and all that. Guess what? Next to the airport, you got a FedEx. You got a UPS. Those are attracted to the airport for obvious reasons. You got warehouses there. You have hotels there. You have taxi businesses there. When they say incompatible land use activities, like heavy industry is never going to be in the high class housing area. It's not going to happen. The landfill is not going to be in Carmel. Little thing called NIMB, not in my backyard. Where's the landfill at? The landfill's in, well, one of them's in Decatur, right? There's a reason for that. And it's actually close in proximity to a lot of manufacturing that's done over there off Harding Street. You can get to the landfill off Man Road. You're right onto Superior. It'll take you right to it. Good folks at Best Way, they'll take care of you. There's a golf course out there, by the way. It's called Buffer Park. It's literally built on a landfill. Go in there, tell them you know Mr. Jones. The guy in there will take care of you. He's my dad. There were 5 in the sector model. There's 9 here. He's getting much more specific. Just want to talk about how what we just learned about can help us understand a city. They help us understand where certain types of people with social characteristics and economic characteristics tend to occupy, and they occupy the same space. We use census data, right? Every 10 years, they give free pencils and they ask us as taxpayers to fill out census data. We fill out the census data. Using that census data, right? We've been able to evaluate social characteristics to create an overall picture of where various people tend to live, right? Like if you, they'll break down that occupation of land in a lot of different ways, but census is going to tell you a lot of different things. It might tell you like median income. It might tell you, percent of high school graduates, percent of college graduates, what economic sector people are working in, median income. These are all things that can be evaluated, right? Let's criticize the models. Well, one, they're too simple. That's a legitimate criticism of the models, right? Here's another one. It's all based on Chicago, and I'm pretty sure that only one city in the United States of America, or the world for that matter, is Chicago, and that happens to be the city of Chicago, right? Um, the other thing is they're like old, like they're in between World War I and World War II. Like, uh, can we use the relevance of these urban patterns like now in America and abroad? Those are like the main legitimate criticisms. Here's the thing, though. They all kind of play. Like they all still have value, and they all can. You could make an easy argument that they're still reflected in the American urban landscape today. So, just because we want to criticize it, and rightfully so, right? We'll be a critic of every model, and we're always going to be asking, is there a better way? How do they know that? Are there better, are there better ways to think about this? Absolutely. Let's look at how they're legitimate. One, when we look at the concentric zone model, the newer houses tend to be more on the periphery. People living in older houses tend to live in the inner ring. Where's the newer construction taking place? On the periphery, away from the CBD. Where are older homes? Closer to the CBD. Now let's look at the sector model. If you look at two families who own homes, the family with a higher income generally is not going to live in the same area as the family with the lower income. You don't see that. You don't see a neighborhood where some guy's got a $500,000 home and somebody else has an $88,000 home. I'm not knocking an $88,000 home. I lived in an $88,000 home for 20 years. Got back from college and I bought it. It was actually a pretty awesome home. Some days I miss it. The multiple nuclei model. Yeah, people with the same ethnic background are likely to live next to one another. Could we apply the concentric zone model in Houston? Check it out. I do believe we can. See, this is the percent housing built since 2005. And what we see, if we're looking at the age of housing, is how housing is newer in the outer rings of the city than in the inner rings. And we see some birds of a feather flocking together. The sector model. Let's look at median household income. Always look at the key. This kind of forest green is 120,000 and above. This middle area is 60,000 to 120,000, and this below 60,000. Not anything to. I mean, that's still pretty good income. When we look at the high income households, the median household income is the highest in this sector to the west. Here we see birds of a feather flocking together with the wealth, wedges of wealth, lower income, middle income. Last one, multiple nuclei. Well, let's look at race and ethnicity. This pink area is at least 60% African American. This blue color is at least 60% Hispanic. So we see birds of a feather flocking together. Are we seeing that? So, again, we could apply all of these models to modern day North American cities. Now, what happens when we get to the CBDs in Europe? What happens when we get to the CBDs in former European colonial cities? What happens when we get to the CBDs in Latin America? Man, what a great question. Hope you show up next time because we'll be answering it.